This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and today it will just be Ewen McKenzie. Now, I don't mean that by saying it's just Ewen McKenzie, but certainly there's a lot to talk about. But Eddie Jones is on a plane doing a fairly typical Eddie Jones thing. I think as soon as the game was finished, he would have been back in his hotel, packed his bag, gone to the airport. He's flown to Europe to do scouting for their European tour later in the year, where the coaches go from city to city, looking at the hotels, thinking about the transport. And Ewen McKenzie, just before we jump into the rugby, this sort of scouting role that you have when you are a head coach, it's a pretty important part of setting up the team for success. When you were a head coach and even when you were an assistant coach, how important was it that you were able to go to the hotels and that you're able to go to the training grounds and you're able to go to the gyms and all those other places as you start planning these important matches?
It definitely takes the surprises out, and especially if you're going to places you haven't been before. It's a bit different if you're going to South Africa and you've been to Cape Town 10 times and you know the training venue options, and you know where the scrum machines are and things like that. So it's different. But if you're going somewhere you haven't been, the last thing I was involved in, ironically, was the year prior to the World Cup. So it was 2015. So the year before that,
in the UK,
you had to scout. You had to do the scouting. You were required to do the scouting for the World Cup venues and training venues. So I did all that prior to that for the Wallabies, but then obviously I wasn't there at the World Cup. But we chose all the venues and all the training locations and gymnasiums and things like that, and all the facilities. So you do that a year out, and that was definitely worthwhile because they present you with different scenarios or different places, but they all have equal amount of gym equipment, etc. But it's just a question of logistics and where you might be and how far you want to travel, and on the day for training and things like that, and also where you want to set up in relation to the games and the way the games occur. So it makes a big difference in a World Cup about where you're based in the pool, and then obviously where you end up in the quarters, semis, etc. So so it is an important part, and certainly if you're going to places you've never been, you need to have a look for sure.
And in the case of the head coach, obviously having the manager with you is important as well, isn't it, for the logistics side of things, because ultimately it's the team manager who is responsible for making sure that the bus turns up on time and that the food's edible and the water's there, and because it's the most thankless job in world rugby, isn't it, being the team manager? Because
it is.
If everything goes well, that's great, but if anything goes wrong, the manager often cops a hiding.
Well, it gets down to there's a number of, you take central London or something like that, there's a number of training venues, and then if you radiate out from there, the hotels, the further out you get, you're more likely to get a more modern hotel, which will have bigger rooms, more likely to have twin double beds, for instance, or twin queen-size beds, which matters because you've got tall guys and big guys. But the closer you go in, you start getting the building built in 1500s, and therefore the rooms are small and the beds are small, and then you've got big tall guys with their feet hanging off the bed, and that sounds silly, but that's the reality of it. You're getting down to virtually looking through all the rooms to make sure the guys will get a good night's sleep. So and quality of food, all of that food, whether you can have an input into the food preparation side of things, because that matters. Depending on culturally, it matters for different teams about what they eat the night before the game and how they build up during the week. So you're into that nth detail, and you need the manager to be able to see all that up front, but also be able to manage that through so that when you get there, all that stuff just rolls out. Team room availability, because you don't get the hotel to yourself. There's often other people there, so you've got to make sure there's no other conference there or something like that, so that the hotel's not distracted and you haven't got team room availability, etc. Or you've got to move things around during the week. So there's a lot in that space, for sure.
Actually, as I think about you discussing it, I think into the future, I'll get my old ABC radio reporter's hat on and maybe do a story about the build up through the week, because people often they wouldn't know. They see the game on the weekend, but all of the bits and pieces that build up into the week. I think it'd be interesting for people to know just exactly what goes into that planning. But that's for another time, and I'm sure while he's there,
I think it's underreported now. In my recollection, there seemed to be a lot more journalistic interest in the preparation, and you'd see journalists at training. These days, you just don't. Maybe it's reported in the tabloids, but you don't see it on the news. You don't see the guys getting on the bus, going to training. You see maybe a grab. And that's, to be fair, sometimes the teams only give you the first 10 minutes of training to be able to get a film. So then they don't bother turning up. So that's one of the things that teams have to take into account, that if you limit the press too much, they just won't turn up to the venue. They just won't show it. So you're not on the news that night. And therefore you get a bit of a blank week, where suddenly you ring, the Wallabies are playing this weekend, for instance. I'm not saying it's the Wallabies, but any team. If you don't make it too easy, if you don't make it easy for the media, they won't turn up. They'll go and report on something else. So that's something you've got to have in the back of your mind as a coach, that you can't be too insular to the media. Otherwise, no one promotes the game for you. It's free promotion.
Yeah. No, well, traditional media models are obviously challenged by digital transformation, and effectively, the advertising industry has sort of moved online to the big platforms and away from traditional media. So there are challenges around the resources and having enough people available to go. But to your point, this old, we'll give you the first 15 minutes of training and then off you go. I always argued throughout my entire time that they weren't there to, film the moves. They were just there to get something a little bit more interesting. So when you just have people warming up and stretching, they're boring pictures. And when it comes, there's a saying in television: no pictures, no story. So if you don't make it interesting, they're not going to follow it.
Yeah,
so
they won't.
And it's a big.
They won't hang around after training. Like for them, they've got to file a story by a certain time. So there's time restrictions on the media. So you've got to be cognizant of that, about when you train. And therefore, if you want them to hang around and maybe interview players after for more colour, for them to stay there for the 90 minutes or whatever and then get the colour bits at the end, that's a big commitment from the media perspective, because there's always other shows there's always other things in town. So you've got to think about all that, and whether if you're not going to do that, then you've got to have the players available prior to training to be able to speak. Sure, you might put the person up in front of everyone in terms of a pool situation, but that's, if you want to do more than that and get the game, promote and create heroes, you got to people have to see the personality of the players, and you don't often get that in a session where all the media are just firing questions at a guy. You need to be able to have those one-on-one situations where the media can be a little bit lateral and try and capture the personality a bit better. So that's all part of the game promotion and promoting the individuals, because they're the ones that are going to be the heroes to the kids. So you've got to be able to get their personality out there amongst the fan base.
Yeah, it's a huge work on for rugby around the world. We just don't do it as well as we need to. And we have a look at I just take an example of the American sports. They have press conferences in the change rooms where the players are sitting at their lockers and everybody's allowed in to film and to get that opportunity. Now, that would never happen at the moment in rugby, but it's one of the big changes that has to take place. There has to be a cultural renaissance to understand that media now works a lot differently than it did in the past. And so we're going to have to change the way that we do things if we're going to compete in the attention economy, which is what we're competing for. And if you have a look at the challenges that we've got as a sport, which is why we started Rugby Unity, we've got a very singular purpose here, which is to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. And this transformation around access for media is just one part of a number of changes that need to take place. Because as you say, if we don't give people the access, if we don't give the journalists and influencers and other content creators the opportunity to get to know, to be engaged with, to tell the stories, to bring the personalities out, to create the opportunities, we are going to struggle. And I think it's instrumental or indicative of just how powerful engagement can be when you just have a look at what the Wallabies have done in this international series so far in terms of that engagement with the fans post-match, that they've done it in a number of the venues so far very deliberately. And that has had, in my opinion, a marked impact on the enthusiasm for the team, because not only are they playing a particular way, but they're communicating their authentic selves and they're giving time to the fans. And it's very impactful what the Wallabies have done, and they deserve great credit for what they've done so far this year.
No, I agree 100%. And it's not difficult. It's a matter of being cognizant of it and making it part of the day. And so you can't just schedule a whole lot of things in the line and say the buses are leaving at this time. Otherwise, it puts people under the time pressure of getting out of the stadium post-match, whereas that engagement needs to be part of the schedule. And you do see it in other sports. I mean, AFL, they'll always go in there for the team song. You always see that. So you see that sort of intimate interaction, the team song from the winning side. But you'll see in dressing room chats, and it becomes moments of controversy when reporters aren't allowed in there because maybe they were affiliated with other clubs in the past and whatever. And I noticed Rugby League does the same. They'll send in a reporter, at half time, and they'll get a little bit more intimate detail of what's going on. But you see what's going on in the background too, and that's part of feeling like you're part of the preparation or part of the celebration. And then you've got to know the personality of the players. At the moment, it's better for rugby to manage that space through the media rather than just relying on social media, because that can give you a skewed perspective, and it's often not about rugby. It's just, so if you want to find out more about the personality and how that personality connects with the game, the media is a really good tool to be able to evolve that and make sure it comes out the right way.
And the media remains, or traditional media in inverted commas, remains very, very influential and very important to telling the stories. They're still reaching television stations, radio stations are still reaching, millions and upon millions of people. And it's important that we create the opportunities. And again, I do think that this Women's Rugby World Cup has set a new standard, not just in terms of fan engagement, the way that the players post-match have engaged with the fans, but last week, speaking to Sarah Massey, who's the managing director of Rugby World Cup, she was saying that the BBC have done an incredible job. Now, we haven't seen it here in Australia, of course, but what they've done is not just put the A-team of their rugby commentators onto the sport and given it the absolute best possible coverage of the sport itself, but a lot of the shoulder programming, the cooking programming, the kids programming, and they've had women and they've had the women's players involved in all of this shoulder programming as well, which is, again, reaching different audiences. And it's rugby's difficult because it's so big and it's so dispersed and it's very hard to get people aligned around it. But sharing some of these best practices and getting people around the world to be able to see the sorts of impacts that it can have if you can work with your broadcast partner and you can get access to that shoulder programming, that's just a huge opportunity to show those personalities and to get to new audiences, because essentially, as many people will have heard me say it over and over again here at Rugby Unity, the mission has to be, we've got to attract more people in more countries to care more about the game. And the way you'll do that is by exposing them to more audiences. And it's not just social media. Social media is important, but media critically important as well. So anyway, we could talk about this, and we will continue to talk about this because it's an important part of this mission that we have set ourselves about helping secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, because there's the on-field component, and we do get to share it each week here with two of the best coaches in the world, Ewen McKenzie and Eddie Jones. But it's important that we continue to talk about the off-field as well, because that's where the commercialisation will be driven. It's where the relationships will be created that will be able to go to sponsors to create better experiences that they will be far more prepared to invest more money in, so we can fund a lot of the development that needs to take place to help rugby realise its potential, because there's clearly not enough money in the game as yet. So anyway, we will keep talking about that, but we'll also talk about, as we look backwards over a weekend where there was some great rugby played, the Pacific Nations Cup. Eddie Jones's team defeated by Fiji 33 points to 27, got off to a pretty good start, but then the Fijians came back and walloped them with 4 turnover tries. It was 33-10 at half-time. The Japanese climbed back into the game. If they'd had a little bit more time, maybe they could have got there. But Ewen McKenzie, what was your assessment of not just that match itself, but the actual tournament of the Pacific Nations Cup?
Well, obviously, getting involved in this podcast and talking with Eddie, and we've been talking about it week in, week out, I've taken a far greater interest than they probably have, and I didn't appreciate how long it had been going for. So it had been running in the background, but I watched the final. It was at 11:30 in the morning Australian time, 11:30 in the morning on Sunday. So I watched it live, and I enjoyed it. It was there wasn't a big crowd. It was a good venue. Even the commentary, American commentators, had a different emphasis, which I thought was good. I thought that they'd watched the tournament, they had knowledge about what had been going on in the tournament, and they commentated a really good game. It was a really good exhibition of rugby, and there was a lot of tactical aspects that went into the Japanese performance in particular. Eddie's team controlled the game for the first 20, 25 minutes, and as you say, the Fijians, they were able to work off turnovers and they direct and get a one-on-ones with offloads. Very hard to stop that, and they powered over for a bunch of tries. You'd think that was probably game over, and they probably might have thought that. But the Japanese were very good at they found a way to get back into the game with their enthusiasm, and they've got some very good players, and their sprightly, enthusiastic and tactical approach got them right back in there. And I felt for them, because I thought if the game went for a couple more minutes, I think they might have actually got there, at least got to, within a point. But that didn't happen. And I look back through the game, and the attritional part of the game was there for the Japanese. They were able to put a lot of pressure on Fiji. Fiji got no real involvement with the ball in the first sort of 20 minutes of the game. It was all Japan, and they scored some nice tries, nice tactical tries around the front of the line-out, kicked all their goals. But then there's a couple of incidents in the game, and it always gets back to the referee with rugby. There's a couple of Fiji knocked the ball down a couple of times, and the referee went back. He went back and said, we're playing under advantage, and went back to the original offence. And I'm thinking to myself, well, a knockdown's a knockdown. That should be a yellow card. So there could have theoretically been a couple of yellow cards earlier in the game. There was later in the game, and that probably, for me, points to the discipline aspect that Japan was able to impose on Fiji. They frustrated them a lot, and they ended up with a couple of guys in the bin later in the game, and there could have been a couple more, to be honest, and that might have changed the complexion of the game. But he didn't referee that aspect, and that's another question for us in the bigger game about, you're playing advantage and then someone knocks the ball down. Now, I don't agree with that being an automatic yellow card, but that's the way it's deemed to be. Yet he decided that that's under advantage. No, you've got to go back to the original. I thought, well, no, you're playing on advantage, so why isn't it just treated the same? So I'm not quite sure what happened there. It's really a question for maybe the referees can tell us what's going on. But twice it happened in the game, and yet other test matches you would have seen 2 guys in the bin, which we saw in the Argentina-Australia game. And so you had that, and then there was, at the end of the game, there was the sort of repeated infringement period where, and there's another question for the refereeing community, whatever, is when you play against a team and you get repeated penalties in defence, that ultimately the scoring of a try seems to suddenly negate the fact that all this cynical play occurred leading up to the try. Now, I've seen it in some games where the referee will award the try, then go and send someone to the bin for the cynical play. But in this situation, that didn't happen.
So in other words, you can be cynical, but the try alleviates all of that cynicism, and there's no impact for all that cynical play that occurred in the lead up to the try. So that's again another question, a bigger picture question about what happens in those situations. Yeah, they scored a try, but does that negate the fact that they're offside 4 or 5 times in the lead up, despite numerous warnings? Someone should go for at least some sort of acknowledgement that you can't get away with that type of play. So that was in the game, but really impressed with the Japanese captain. Dern, he's a fantastic second. I don't know his background. I haven't looked, but I'm going to look because I think he's
a Kiwi.
He's world class. That guy.
He's a Kiwi.
There was one point in the first half where Fiji made a break down the right hand side. He chased the winger down, and then the play went to the midfield and then went to the far side of the field, and he actually makes a tackle on the other side of the field. They actually score Fiji, but he had involvement both sides of the field in try-saving capacities twice. They still scored, but so you would not see that. You mightn't have noticed it, but there was his second row, a gangly guy that did all that. A really good player, really impressive. I can see why Eddie's got him as the captain. He's only a young guy, you know.
Well, Eddie did say last week, and it did catch my attention, where he said he thought he could become, one of the top locks in the world.
I think
he is obviously comparing him.
I think if he's in New Zealand now, he'd be playing for the All Blacks. I think he's a really. It's not like they've got a lot of options there. I think he'd be, outstanding All Black. Like, I think he's got all of the. He's got a good motor. He scores tries, carries well. He made a crunching tackle on one of the Fijians. He smashed a guy, and he's got all of their attributes. Good in the line out. He's only young. So I'm really impressed with him. He's a world-class player, and he's only just starting out. So it just goes to show you've got to keep looking. And I don't know how he got to Japan, but someone's done really well, and credit to Eddie, he's playing for Japan. So he's a good player. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and interestingly, Eddie Jones was saying a couple of weeks ago that I think they were about 20 people shy through this period. So 20 of Japan's top players are either playing in Europe or resting after the league season, so they weren't available for selection. So they're playing down, and clearly a number of the Fijians weren't there as well. So I think depth, I think it's great that...
Yeah, it's depth, but they handled the Fijian physicality. There was a patch there where the Fijians got away, and that's really just one-on-one with an offload, and suddenly they're behind you. Yeah, but they tackled them really well, and they had some great innovation, which we'd seen through the tournament. So they're a bit of a handful. You wouldn't want to be playing them in a World Cup scenario because they'd be complicated. They're a complicated side to play. Their scrum is not a heavyweight scrum, but is really effective, and they put a lot of pressure on Fiji and got milked some penalties out of that situation. So yeah, they've got a really good package, and if they've got another 20 players sitting in the background, well, that's great for Japan.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that they will be ready and looking for that quarter-final spot at the 2027 World Cup. And indeed, there will be a match between the Wallabies and Japan in late October in Tokyo. So that will be another match to look forward to as well. Some other results from the Pacific Nations Cup. Tonga 35 defeated Canada 24. And in the all-important World Cup qualification match, Samoa and Chile played a 32-all draw. It was 25-8 at halftime. Chile were in front, but the Samoans came back and forced it to 32-all. So now they head to Chile, to Vin del Mar, which is where they will play this weekend, a stadium with a capacity around 24,000. And there are hopes that that match will sell out in Chile this weekend when it's all to play for between Samoa and Chile. So it's great, isn't it, to think that there will be a capacity crowd around about 24,000 in Vina del Mar or Vin del Mar in Chile. And again, it just shows the breadth of the game, the growth of the game, and really normally we wouldn't be talking about these things. The mainstream media is not thinking about this, but there's going to be 24,000 people in Chile this coming weekend for this all-important match. And so bringing attention to it is to just show, the glorious breadth and depth and diversity of our great game.
Well, I'm disappointed because I've stopped many times in Chile on the way to Argentina. You stop in the airport there, nice airport. I always thought it's a pity they don't have a team, but clearly they do, and they do now, and not so much back then. But so that's if Chile, Uruguay, Argentina. I mean that as a if you're looking for development tours and opportunities for places to go as a development team from Australia or New Zealand, whatever, surely you could be able to get over there and you get some games against. Like Chile would be thirsty for games, hungry for games. So would Uruguay, and just to try and be better. So if New Zealand or Australia can send development teams in that direction, great opportunity to see a different part of the world that you wouldn't normally see. And play some good rugby. So it's good that these sides are getting competitive and giving opportunities for what the game really offers is this chance to travel the world, and that's what it really offers against some of the other codes.
Yeah, indeed. So actually, some more news. Super Rugby Americas. There will now be a fourth Argentinian team competing in Super Rugby Americas. Santa Fe, Rosario and Entre Rios, which are three unions, are coming together. It's the coastal region, so they'll be the fourth Argentinian team. There's the Dogos 15, Pampas and Tarocas, so that's four Argentinian teams. And then you've got Penarol from Uruguay, Selknam from Chile. So it's the base, the Chile team that's competing forms the basis of Selknam. And then there's the Cobras from Brazil and Yacare from Paraguay. So they will be the teams that will compete in Super Rugby Americas. And we will be doing everything we possibly can here at Rugby Unity to keep drawing attention to it, because Ewen McKenzie, I think that is a fantastic idea. Can you imagine the experiences that people will have going to play rugby in these South American countries? It would be like it'd change your life. Change your life, those experiences.
100%. I mean, it's an amazing sounding competition. We've all, those of us have been fortunate enough have travelled over that way, and it's a beautiful part of the world. And to be able to play there as a player, I mean, that's another playing opportunity for some. But the idea is obviously to develop domestic talent, but there'll be some opportunities there for some overseas players to go there and play and experience a completely different lifestyle and different geography. It's fantastic. I wasn't even aware that that's where it's going, but that's something else for us to watch with intent and take an interest. I mean, I've got to get my head around pronouncing all the names, but I'll get my head around that. And I know the regions, I know the towns, I know all the cities, but I'm not familiar with the provinces, so I'll have to try and get.
We've got work to do here at Rugby Unity. We're helping secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, and that is obviously. Yeah, Brazil's got a team, the Cobras.
There's an opportunity there for Brazil to start to grow the game there too, just by having some sort of pathway there for them. So that's terrific, And Chile, we've already talked about. So
we just had the Brazilian women's team compete in the Women's Rugby World Cup. Yeah. So anyway,
so things are on the move.
I think that's a great idea.
Things are on the move, which is encouraging.
No question. And interesting you say that, because here in Australia at the moment we have the Super Rugby AU competition, where you have both the four Super Rugby teams, Waratahs, Force, Reds and Brumbies competing against each other over a sort of round-robin period, just to give the players more of an opportunity. It was played over the weekend, and there were some standout performances. There's a guy called Max Bury, a kid from Wagga Wagga, played his rugby at Norths. He's gone across to the Force. He played outstandingly well as their number 10. And there was a young man by the name of James Hendren. He's one of yours, Link. He's from Randwick. He scored 4 tries against the Reds at the Santos Rugby Festival out in Narrabri, which, for those of you who are not from Australia, it's in country New South Wales, beautiful part of the world. And they played there over the weekend. But wouldn't it be great if you could select a combined under-19s team and a combined, Super AU team and send them off to go and play in South America.
That's what I think. Personally, that's what I think we should be doing. I think the reward for doing well in those tournaments, or being, you pick a tournament team out of that, is to send them away and then see how they go in that sort of environment. It's all very well they're playing against each other, but you put them in against foreign opposition. I'm not talking 5-star accommodation trip. I'm talking about budget, but fun. Where the guys go and actually and test themselves against other teams in the world, and they'd be hungry for the competition for sure. So that's where we've got to try and link these tournaments together, and maybe this Rugby Americas, Super Rugby Americas, they can try and get some finals and things like that occurring to try and add value and add incentive and add something to the pathway and add something to the for coaches and people higher up the line looking down to see. You talked about Bury. I've seen his name mentioned a few times, that people have talked about him in comments on different forums and stuff like that. So he's clearly a 10 of some ability. So we need those guys.
He had a great game at the weekend. He played well.
Yeah, but I get worried about those sort of guys because someone in France or something like that sees these guys and bang, they're gone. Before you even knew you had the guy, he's gone. Like, he's a guy that's got to be someone from the Super Rugby team.
Well, he's 26.
Yeah, but
he's 26, so he's been around.
That's all right.
But interestingly, and we're going to talk about it when we do get to the Rugby Championship preview, because you mentioned something to me last Friday, which I thought was interesting about the robustness of number 10 and the position, and how the game at where it is at the moment requires real physicality. And this Bury, he's 26 years old, so he's quite well developed and he's quite stocky. But beautiful footwork. Oh, jeez. He carved through the Brumbies on a couple of occasions and scored one try in particular, 2 tries actually. But anyway, we'll come to him in a moment. So there you go. But also, I've been watching the under-19s as well. And just imagine selecting the best of that under-19s and then putting them on a plane to go to South America for 3 weeks, to go through Paraguay, Brazil, Chile, If they go to Argentina, that's fine. Maybe go to Uruguay. That would be, again...
It doesn't have to be 3 weeks.
Not only does it make... it's going to bring players through, which is obviously part of what we've got to do, but it's going to change the lives of those young men and young women forever.
100%. But it doesn't have to be 3 weeks, so you don't have to think in... Like, you can jam the games together and make them back up and play. That's all part of the exercise to see how they go. You don't have to have. Yeah, okay. There's no law that says you've got to have 7 days between games. Like, that just happens with that's how the weekends fall. But in a World Cup, you don't get that. Yeah. Sometimes you got to play 4 days later, and so you test people out in those situations. Can they get up and play 2 games in a week? That's. Yeah. It all goes, but it's got to be affordable too. You've got to manage. Everything has to have a budget to it, and so the longer you travel, the more expensive it is, and the more players you take. And the squad sizes have grown. I can recall back in my day that the squads were much smaller. Like, you'd only have like 26, but now they have 35, and you don't think that those extra 10 people, because there's also staff that has to manage those 10 people in terms of that those 10 people, that's 5 hotel rooms. It doesn't sound like a lot, but you multiply it out, multiply the meals out, you've suddenly got yourself another $50,000-$60,000 worth of cost in a week, right? So that you got to say, that's what I want to spend it on or not. But so when you're traveling, you got to work it out and make sure you understand all of that, because having extra people is nice, it's great, but you take them all to New Zealand, or you take them, have a bigger squad there or a smaller squad, and run an under-19s development tour somewhere to South America.
Yeah.
So you got more irons in the fire.
I think we're onto something. We're onto something here at Rugby Unity. We're the Ideas Podcasts. But I just think that would be superb for the game. So anyway, we'll leave it there. But well done to Fiji for winning the Pacific Nations Cup, and good luck to both the Samoan and Chilean teams this weekend for that all-important game. I would love. There'd be nothing I would enjoy more than going to that game and experiencing rugby in that part of the world with that great enthusiasm. Because, again, like the Argentinian crowd made that Sydney test in so many ways with the enthusiasm that they brought and the whistles and the drums and it's all part of, this rich tapestry that we have in our game. So anyway, but there were also the Women's Rugby World Cup at the weekend. Canada, too good. For New Zealand, comprehensive winners, 34 points to 19. I think it got away to 31 points to 7 at one point. They didn't concede a penalty until the 60th minute. Sophie de Goody, their lock, is an outstanding footballer. Tessier, the captain, her kicking game was great. Pelletier, the half, really organised things well. And just a high-quality performance from a very good team. Ewen McKenzie, were you able to catch
I did.
Canada's win over New Zealand?
I saw highlights of it, and I was impressed. I've been watching them across more in recent weeks, but they're a good side. What would impress me was their ability to play in around the ruck, and they're able to turn some balls back in behind and really exploit just inside passes and scoring out of the posts. Yeah. They mixed that up with making some great breaks out wide. So it was a really good blend of attack, but in the end the forwards did the work up front. So they were impressive. I tipped New Zealand based on their experience, but that didn't show through. And Canada really showed why they're the number 2 team in the world. And I guess that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a 2 versus 1. It's probably the promoter's dream. See what comes out of it. But England will be a little bit worried because France didn't give them an easy night. France stayed in the contest the whole game. So England will be a little bit worried about Canada because Canada certainly can express themselves. You mentioned some really good game controllers there, so they've got a pretty complete game, yeah, pretty good.
So against England, and you mentioned that match, England-France, and it was good that for both games. So I think we were speculating or going off the weather reports that was suggested that it was going to rain, but I think both games were completed in very, very good conditions. England, obviously, particularly towards half-time there, the French really ran them close. Ultimately, 35 points to 17. A couple of, moments of brilliance from their fullback, Ellie Kildunn, who is the reigning Women's Rugby Player of the Year, and she's clearly a very talented rugby player. Scored, as I say, a couple of beautiful tries. But really it was the England pack ultimately that were able to grind the French and grind away and work hard and get that rolling maul going. But is England going to have to do more to beat Canada? Because I think Canada clearly a step ahead of France in terms of their organisation, in terms of the quality of their play, and indeed, working, because I'm sure they will have taken great confidence out of that comprehensive win over New Zealand.
I agree 100%. I mean, beating New Zealand, with their pedigree, the tournament pedigree they had, I didn't realise it went as deep as it did. So they'll take a lot out of that. In a way, England needed a tough game, I think. So I think they got that from France. And so I don't think they were complacent, but it will focus the English players' minds and it'll allow give the coaches something to point to and say, we're going to get all the little things right here. Otherwise, we could be under the pump because they're a pretty good side we're about to play. But that try by Kildunn in the second half, you could feel a sense of relief when she made that big break and she scored. And you think that there was a sense of relief there. But prior to that, France wouldn't go away. They're a pest, and they're only a young side and young and enthusiastic. But they scored some nice tries. So and stayed in the contest. So that's what in the back of England's mind they'll be thinking. Well, Canada's better than them. And they'll definitely be able to stay in the contest. So we've got a bit of a fight on our hands. So they are going to need that gritty resilience of their forward pack. but they've got some good. There's some good players up against them, so it's going to be a really exciting game.
Oh, it'll be a great final. I haven't looked at the long-range weather forecast, but hopefully they get blue skies. Twickenham has sold out. So it's just a big week in terms of the pressure, isn't it? At home World Cup.
I think it's great.
Particularly after what happened to England 2015. Everyone's expecting them to win. They're 32 in a row now. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's going because they haven't quite yet shown us that complete performance. They don't go into the final, off a red-hot performance. They go off a serviceable, high-quality skill.
You can only do what
high-quality player.
You can only do what your opponents let you do, and they've put on some pretty good. They've built some pretty good scoreboards during the tournament. So, they're going toe-to-toe with France, and France have got that X factor sort of mentality, the way they play. So that was always on the cards to be closer. But as I said, they didn't really get away from them until the last sort of 10 or 15 minutes. So, but Twickenham, that's great that the game's there, like the home of rugby in England, and to have a full house. I mean, you couldn't get a better scenario. I'm sure the royal family they'll be there somewhere. So it's going to be that sort of occasion. So it's a big one. So it didn't help them in 91. So when we were there, so maybe the occasion might be too much. We'll see. But I think Canada will be.
That's it.
It can get too much. So but I think they got the coach. He'll have them grounded. And but Canada, but very impressed. They've done a really good job. So, as Eddie said, it's good for world rugby, good for Canadian rugby that they're in the final. Really good.
Yeah, the coach is an impressive guy as well. That Kevin Rouet, who's there, quietly spoken, French Canadian, clearly has the confidence of his team and his players. They've been at it now for a number of years, building this team. So they've been working towards this particular weekend over a long period of time. So anyway, as you say,
he clearly knows what he's doing. And he's, unfortunately for Canada, guys like him suddenly end up getting offers from all sorts of clubs in Europe and stuff like that. So you got to keep your eye on your players. You got to keep your eye on your coach too, because he's clearly a good operator.
Yeah,
and he's not even defying the odds. He's created a world class team, and he's just knocked off the Kiwis. So everyone will be going, that guy's got the goods. So they need to make sure they keep him under lock and key. Otherwise, because he's really and maybe he can. One of the mistakes, or one of the things that happens is when the women's, one of the coaches said, well, they shift them across into the other program, men's and women's. They did it in the sevens. Australia did it with the sevens programs. They start shifting the coaches around. It doesn't tend to work, but he's clearly a good 15-a-side coach, and they need to make sure he's under lock and key in Canada. Yeah.
All right, we'll wait and see. So before we come to the Rugby Championships, the third voice, you have been in touch again, and thank you so much across all of our platforms, whether it's Substack, whether it's YouTube, Apple, Spotify, indeed TikTok. I had a bit of fun with the TikTok audience over the last few days. I tipped Fiji on TikTok originally, but then I changed my mind and went back to Japan off the back of a conversation with Eddie. And so I changed my mind. So anyway, all the Fijian fans have given me an absolute bollocking since that happened. So anyway, there you go. It's all good fun. You got to have an opinion. So away we go. So some comments here from Hendrik de Wet. I am a Bok fan, and I love this podcast to see players and games from a coach's perspective. Hendrik, thank you for being in touch. Neil Sinclair says, this is a proper podcast, ! Two world-class coaches who have coached at the top giving insights. And I do think that is our point of difference. And those of you out in the audience, if you'd like to rate, share, review, subscribe, just help us to be found, that always is appreciated. Gary Emery, who is a regular, Gary says, hi, David. Another thoughtful and unbiased podcast from Eddie, Ewan, and your good self. The Wallabies have already beaten one record this rugby championship by winning at Ellis Park. And I hope they can break another record winning at Eden Park. It's about time the Wallabies regained the Bledisloe. Go the Wallabies. We'll be talking about that in just a moment. And finally, DPE on YouTube says, I hope the Wallabies know what they're in for when they meet the All Blacks for the first Bledisloe Cup next week, or this week now. Sonny Bill Williams has tried to warn them, but I don't think that too many of them are listening. Personally, I think the need for revenge on the All Blacks' part is going to be so great that they will literally blow the Wallabies off the park. And this is coming from a Safa. So, yes, indeed. Well, we'll come to that, and we do have some questions, your questions, that we're going to come to after we discuss the Rugby Championship. But first of all, we do start again, and it's all locked up and even and, wins apiece, losses apiece. We come into what is certainly a very exciting time for the game. And indeed, it does look like this Rugby Championship, for all the speculation, is just about done. And we are now going to be returning to a touring mindset where, maybe Australia goes to Argentina for 3 test match series as the All Blacks are going to South Africa next year, playing those 3 test matches, but also playing against the United Rugby Championship teams there in South Africa for what will be a tour to remember. But before we get to all of that, we do have this very exciting, the culmination of this very exciting Rugby Championship. Australia versus New Zealand is the first of the matches that we'll have this weekend. They've selected their squads. James O'Connor, having returned or having gone to Leicester, dropped everything off and jumped on the next plane and came back. Jake Gordon returns. Nick White has retired. The big news, perhaps, is that Bobby Valetini is out of the first match, at least, in Eden Park, which is a big out for Australia. His place taken by Pete Samo in the squad, and it's confirmed in terms of that squad in particular that Will Skelton will not play. So, Ewen McKenzie, you've had a look at the Australian squad. What are your thoughts?
I wasn't surprised to see Gordon coming back in because he obviously went out with injury. I was surprised at that's happened with White retiring and retiring again, but retiring and dropping out. So that's sort of become very final in that aspect. And White's been pretty influential in this last period of time. So that is a bit of a loss. It's given Gordon's coming. It
is a loss with White. But my understanding with Jake Gordon is that he is the ultimate team man and is a very important part of this whole. And you've seen, he's been selected as captain of the team, but he plays a key role in this team. He is a key guy. So he's a bit of a like for like swap. White out, who obviously very influential, but Gordon coming back in equally as influential as Nick White.
There's no question about that. It's just about where they're up to on match fitness, really. That's probably more about what I was thinking about. And I don't know enough about what Gordon's been doing, whether he's just coming back in and he hasn't played for a bunch of weeks now. So it's more in that space that I was concerned. But that's that. O'Connor going to England, I know a lot of people have asked the question about him going, why did he go to England and then why is he coming back? I suspect, and they haven't said it, but there are a bunch of things that happen in European rugby. If you're playing club football over there or whatever, you've got to be in a country by a certain date, for instance, to be eligible for the European Cup competition. So there's a bunch of things. So in other words, it stops teams importing players to play in the European Cup later in the year. So there's a bunch of things, a bunch of dates that you've got to satisfy. You've physically got to be there. So I saw footage of him, with his Leicester gear on and meeting the players and things like that. So there's no doubt that he was there. So I'm sure that there's a regulatory reason why he had to turn up in England. And now he's coming back and they're talking about him linking up in Auckland. So I'm not even sure what the Wallaby preparation is. I'm not sure when they started in camp. It's not quite clear.
They left yesterday.
Yeah, so
they left yesterday for New Zealand.
Yeah, so they're going to prepare over there. So that gives him the time to possibly be in the starting team. Maybe not. I don't know. I'm not sure they're going to keep using him off the bench and stick with Edmund. It'll be interesting. See how they go. I'm not sure. But Valentini's a loss for sure, but it avoids the selection dilemma with the composition of their team in the back row. So
So we'll see where it goes. They've got a good side. They've in good spirits and good. They've been there and thereabouts. They've been successful or nearly successful, and very competitive. So you're probably not going to get. People say it's a bad time to get New Zealand. I don't know if there's ever a good time to play against New Zealand, but I think it's as good a time as any, because I think there's technical opportunities to play against them. I see just, for instance, Justin Marshall's been critical today of how robotic, really robotic quote from Justin Marshall about how New Zealand's been playing, and their lineout's been struggling. There's one game their lineout was really good, but the rest of the time it's been off and on. So there's some really good opportunities there to be able to attack the New Zealand game. And that robotic play and the depth we talked about, the phase depth we talked about, and getting across the advantage line, there's some real opportunities there for Australia to maybe exploit. So easy to say from a distance, but I don't think the Eden Park thing's always there. I don't worry about that. It's more about getting your tactics right on the night. At the moment, New Zealand's under a bit of pressure, and so I haven't seen their squad. So I'm not quite sure where they're going to go. I'm sure.
Well, some of the things, like there's not going to be wholesale changes, I don't think. What's being reported, Callum Clarke, I think, comes back into the squad, so they're thinking he might start. Importantly, Cameron Roigard, who's been out for quite some time, is now back fit, available for selection. From a line-out point of view, Fabian Holland may come back into one of the starting lock positions, and Cody Taylor's recovered, so he'll come back into starting hooker position. But just in terms of that attack, because Roigard is a very, very fine player and a real threat at the base of the scrum, do you think a selection such as that can have an impact on the way that they're playing? A player like him in a key position such as halfback, could it change the way that they attack?
He will take more responsibility to taking the ball forward. He'll be looking for opportunities where he can play direct, and he's very good at being able to sniff opportunities, get in behind the ruck, and then maybe offload or make a break in his own right. He scored a try on the weekend, I see, in the NPC, so he's straight back into it. So, he can make a difference because he can take the pressure off the 10. If you're just shoveling the ball to 10 all the time, he's got to make all the decisions. That can be hard. So he will create a different threat, and he'll hold defenders a little bit tighter to the ruck, so that might create some more space out wide. So, yes, one person can make a difference. Clarke's a good player, so he's a bit more robust than the wingers they've been using. He's a threat in his own right. I like Holland as a player in the second row. So, but I think Tupavai's been playing pretty well for him as well. So, I know what this obviously the captain's is a second rower, so they could maybe reorganise that a little bit, but to try and get everyone in. But the back rows, they seem a bit more settled with the back row. They've been running the same back row for the last couple of games, so they might stick with that. But I'd like to see Holland in there, and ultimately I think Holland and Vi would be the good second row combination for the future. So whether they want to be as bold as Rassie and leave the captain out, I don't know. But they're all things that Rassie did that last week and left Etzebeth completely out of the 23. So whether New Zealand are at that point making big decisions like that, we'll see. But I think Holland and Tupavai are the guys for them longer term. So I'd love to have the guy from Japan too. Durban was there, put him in, but he's not a one. He looks really good. I don't know how he slipped away. Anyway,
so you've coached teams who've copped a hiding 1 week
not too many.
to the next, and everything that
it's hard. It's hard. If you get a touch up, it's hard. There's no doubt about that.
So take us through it. What's that like? It's obviously not a lot of fun.
It's not a lot of fun because...
particularly in New Zealand, they don't like losing anything.
I think I remember losing to New Zealand once, and they got us at the line out a couple of times. It was just with simple driving plays, and they hadn't been doing any of that. So they got us tactically. We hadn't sort of prepared greatly for that because they hadn't been using it in their game prior to that test, but they introduced it and used it to good effect. So that's where strategy is important. You got to make sure you cover all your bases. You can only, if you rely too much on the video you've seen, then you can get caught out, which I did on that day. And so you've got to still prepare for all occasions and be prepared for everything. Around the lineouts is one of the most tactically innovative areas. We've seen that in the games all year. Japan scored a great try against Fiji, same thing. So the innovation around line-out play is probably the most innovative part of the game at the moment. Teams running long throws. So that's an area you've got to prepare wholly. You can't just rely on the videotape from last week and say if we can defend that, we've done enough, because teams change it every week. So, but coming back from, again, you can do the same to the opposition. That's your attitude. You can say you can be one step ahead of them. If they're relying on last week's video, well, you can show them a different game. So I try to have that philosophy week in, week out, and try and show a different picture every week. So you can try and mentally stress your opponent by doing a couple of things that they haven't seen before, and then they all start getting very nervous because they're not quite sure what's coming next. And that's that for me is a real strength, where the mental part of the game comes into play. And that's where, whereas if you just keep doing the same thing, again, I'm going to go back to the Fiji-Japan game. Fiji kicked off the centre field, like I hadn't done that, kicked off and almost got the ball back. You got to, and we saw that, and we've seen that in recent series where teams have done different things at kick-off time and around lineouts. So you've got to stay one step ahead, and that means the opposition's got to be thinking laterally and saying, well, what if they did this? What if they do that? And that takes up more training time, covering the what-if scenarios versus what you know. If you only do the what you know, you can get caught out, and it makes for a more efficient training week because it's easy to show on video, but you've got to cover the what-ifs. What if they did that? And so you've got to have that in your bag as well, bag of defensive solutions.
All right, so we will talk more later in the week when we actually have the teams selected and we know what they look like, and we'll know what the weather conditions are, and we'll be able to talk about the referee. So please make sure you come back on Friday, and I'm sure Eddie Jones will be somewhere that we can find him. If he's not, I'm sure he'll have visited half a dozen Premier League clubs by then, looking for one or two ideas that he might be able to include. But yeah, we'll certainly be looking forward to him next week, Friday of this week to go through. So Ewen McKenzie, the second match, South Africa, Argentina. South Africa obviously returned home after that comprehensive win over their great rival, or their greatest rival. The Argentinians have been in Durban now for some time. I saw a picture of them the other day with the swimming towels heading down to the beach for a swim. So they might be staying out at Umhlanga Rocks, which was a very popular place for the teams back in my day. Obviously Farsi, the fullback, he is out with his ankle surgery all done. But so much depth, so much quality, so much choice. How do you think this match will play? The record for South Africa in Durban over the last 10 years, they've played 4 test matches there, won 2, lost 2. What are your preliminary thoughts on a Monday as we look ahead to what will be another great game of rugby?
I think there's some similar style in play, the attritional direct forward play, and there's some whiz bang from the backs from both teams. If they follow on from the last game, that's what I think that's where South Africa seems to be going, and Argentina have been sort of trying to play that way. If I was going to play South Africa anywhere in South Africa, I'd want to play in Durban, mainly because I managed to win there as a coach with the Wallabies, so that's one reason. But statistically, for the reasons you say, that's the one place, I don't know, sea level. It's a good environment there to prepare, and it's been good at Super Rugby level as well. I've been there many times, so if I wanted to play anywhere, it's there. So I think that's a good it's a good place for Argentina to do their best work, and they'll be they'll be backing themselves. They've been pretty fearless and pretty confrontational in games, and they've pushed Australia. The 1-1 lost one, was only a couple of points in it, and the same with New Zealand. They got that win in Argentina. So I think they'll back themselves to do well. So it all gets down to selections. We'll see what the selections look like.
Yeah, we'll get those teams later in the week, but at fast conditions, open conditions, which will certainly appeal to that hard, fast-running backline. And, they'll mix it up, and they're not going to go there with any other intent, I'm sure, and confidence that they won't be able to secure a victory over South Africa at home. So, that'll be another great match to look forward to this weekend. How good is rugby?
Yeah, well,
it's just.
I mean, that's the point. You've got to keep reminding people that if you get to play at that level, that you look at the places they're playing in and visiting and experiencing. Like it's just, and it's not just at that level now. We're seeing it, and we've talked already about how it's permeating down to the different competition levels. And if we can even artificially create these development tours, you suddenly got. If you got 19-year-old, and this is how I started. My love of the game started when I was at school and I was travelling the world as a schoolboy representative for Victoria, no less. Victorian schoolboys, which no one even thought played rugby. And yet I'd travelled Asia and I'd been to the US twice and Canada and England twice, all before I left school. All because we're on Gulliver's schoolboy trips playing against whoever we could find someone to play against, and we're in Thailand and China, and so to have all those experiences before I even left school, that's what fueled the interest in the game, and from that it grows. But if you can give kids that opportunity, then hopefully they stay engaged.
Yeah. No doubt. And just another plug there for Gulliver's Sports Travels, because you can jump on to Gulliver's Sports Travels, and there are tours that are already there that you can take your team to. And if you've just played a grand final, for example, why not start thinking about, to get ready for next year, you might want to go travel somewhere. And I know New Zealand does it very well for the Australian development teams, and obviously teams have been going there for many years. But Gulliver's Sports Travels, best in the business. Ewen McKenzie, you'd say that, wouldn't you?
I think if you couldn't get at the end of the season, if you couldn't find a game in New Guinea, Tonga, Fiji, Samoa, if you couldn't find a trip there and then get a few games, I'd be very surprised. So I don't think you don't have to be thinking again 5-star. It's just about going somewhere and getting some good games of football and experience some different cultures.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we are going to answer some of your questions before we head out today. And Kieran's been very patient because these questions came in over the last week or two. It was a direct email to the info@rugbyunity.com.au. And he said, why does the Rugby Championship fail to attract significant global media attention compared to the Six Nations? Ewen McKenzie, why is that happening? I've got my views.
I don't think that they've spent enough time trying to commercialise it. I think it's got a bit of a dud name for a start, and it doesn't have the. I mean, it should theoretically have the history, but it doesn't. It's not a name that captures an image. And it's obviously played across a bunch of countries, so there's distance and there's time. There's gaps in the tournament, but that happens in the Six Nations as well. But I'm not sure. I'll default to you, Pemby, because you're the commercial guy, but it's not about the quality of rugby, because we've seen the quality of the games has been terrific. So it's not about that. It's about what they're doing in terms of promoting that.
My view is we don't work hard enough to promote it, and we don't think broadly enough to promote it. So there are the big wire services like AP, Associated Press, like Reuters. We should be there, every day of the week. We need to get more coverage. We need to be working much harder to develop rugby coverage. For example, the New York Times has their sport area is called The Athletic. They don't even cover rugby. Yahoo barely covers rugby. I just think we don't work hard enough to promote ourselves, and we don't tell the rugby story well enough for those big media organisations to understand just how significant rugby is. And it's a long-term project for Rugby Unity. And so World Rugby probably doesn't think the Rugby Championship's their job. The Rugby Championship has a small team. Sands are running it, but Are they thinking about promoting it more broadly than just the countries that they're in? I just think we need to take a much broader view and be far more aggressive in building our relationships with those big platforms and making sure that we are getting that coverage, and then working hard into the Northern Hemisphere to make sure that we are getting the coverage over there for the Rugby Championship. Now, they do it, but it's not as much as I think it should be. But equally, I don't think we cover the Six Nations well enough in the Southern Hemisphere when it's on. We need to do a much better job of promoting these matches. But
so Pemby,
it's elbow grease and then getting on the phone and chasing.
No, but so Pemby, you're able to come on this podcast because it's your profession, so you probably have access to all the different media outlets and whatever feeds and aggregators and whatever, so you can find stuff. Even me as a former coach and player and whatever, if I want to find out, you're telling me things about the preparation for the Wallabies, but I can't find that. I don't find that easily, right? Unless I subscribe to maybe some things. But if I just look on a couple of sites, I don't find that information simply. Even if I Google it, it doesn't pop up. If I Google the All Blacks squad, I'll get something from 3 years ago. I don't know when that information is going to come to the fore. So then I went on stuff.com.au, which is a New Zealand website, to try and find out what the New Zealand squad was, and I got some stories there which I didn't have access to. But it means you've got to go to another website. So what are the websites? What's the best? What we should maybe promote? What are the best websites at the moment? Try and embarrass some of the other websites that aren't covering it, and tell people where to go to find the information, because I can't find it easily. I went to look for some statistics on the Fiji Japan game. I go to ESPN because they present a simple page, but they had the Chile game statistics, but not the Japan-Fiji, which was the final. So I don't know why that is. Yet they have they have the championship games, but you can't get that information, just basic statistics about the flow of the game and whatever, hard to find. So, and I've been in the business, so and I don't want to subscribe to every website to get their story. So it'd be really good if we could maybe help people and tell them, or put something online and say these are the best websites to get broad information.
Yeah. Well, there's all sorts of places. Reddit is a good place to go. I would encourage people to jump onto Reddit and onto the Rugby Union thread and the subreddit there. It's a great place to go. And then there's other places. Planet Rugby is also a very useful resource. They publish a lot of content, but it's been so underinvested for as long as I've been in the game. I go back to when we started the Brumbies back in 1995 or late 95 for that first season in 96. And the commercialisation and the promotion of the game has been an absolute afterthought for the last 30 years, and it remains an afterthought. And it's something that really, if we are going to secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, we've got to do a much better job of promoting the game. And because again, I can pull all this together because I know where to go and have a look and find and pull it all together and try to tell this whole story about rugby. And we haven't even got into the Prem. We're not talking about the top 14, and we can't, because we'll be here for 5 hours if we started, but we will at some point come in and start talking about those as well. But this is this alignment point around rugby and the investment piece. We need to have far more investment into this side of the game so as that we can get more people in more countries caring more about our great game, because there is plenty to like about it. Okay, thanks for that, Kieran. Your second question is the branding of the Rugby Championship part of the problem, and should it be rebranded? Ewen McKenzie, you've made your thoughts on, you reckon it's a dud name, but I don't think we have to worry about it for too much longer because it's not going to exist. No. So rest in peace, the rugby.
That is a problem, though, because we've had different. The Super Rugby format had, it was Super 12, and it was Super 14, and then it became Super Rugby. Like, it's had different iterations, whereas the championship was something else, and it was the Tri-Nations, I think, and then it became the championship when Argentina came in, and they said, "Oh, now it's called the championship," and everyone goes, "Yeah." So, but there was no like no one said this is how we got that. No one even described who thought of that. Like, who thought of that? Like, is that no one ever asked a question. I never got asked. No one said to me, "Or what do you think?" I was involved in it, so it just got plonked on us. So, there needs to be a bit more.
But again, just going back to this, and I think it's one of the reasons that the Rugby Championship has died, because it's died through neglect, that we haven't really, done. And it's the same as Super Rugby. Like, we don't celebrate. You think about those matches that were played, the late 90s, early 2000s, every week. Say, for example, I'll just pick an example, Brumbies versus the Hurricanes. Capital city of New Zealand, capital city of Australia. Every time that match is played, there should be highlights of the great games that were played over the years. There should be the statistics. There should be the stories. There should be the reunions. There should be everything that all the other codes do so well. Rugby does appallingly. We have done nothing. So we have neglected our history. And you think about it.
Let me tell you.
Think about it. We just don't.
I just want to extend that. Like, when you're playing this competition, the Super Rugby competition, I was lucky enough to
yes, you
coach
did.
in a bunch of finals, and so the reward you got for the final was like the tin ass cheapest pewter thing with the worst engraving you ever saw, and I thought that was the reward for coming second, and the winners got the same mug, but they got the trophy, and the trophy's not bad. It's not back in the day, the Tri Nations was in the original Super was quite good, but then it's turned into nasty looking, cheap ass looking trophies. I mean, not even playing for something that looks like anyone's put any thought into it, that's got any quality. You've got the Ranfrey Shield or some of these other. They've got this prestigious looking trophy, and you actually feel like you're playing for something, not just some sort of. We've got through the tournament, we've got to the final, and that's it, and there's the crappiest, there's the cheapest pewter we could find. That's what it feels like, And you got so we haven't even invested in that part of it,
They have invested a little bit more in Super Rugby last year, but they're recovering from 29 years or however many years it is of neglect. It's been an absolute disgrace, and the national unions involved, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, terrible. Terrible.
The Pacific nations, they ran out on the field, right? And did you see the cup for the Pacific nations? It's like the size of a goblet. Like, it's a goblet. I was thought, give the guys something, give them something that they can.
I tell you, we're in the business of we're now talking about trophies. You should see the trophy for the Women's Rugby World Cup. It is magnificent. It is absolutely magnificent.
Okay,
It's exactly as it should be.
That's exactly right.
But anyway.
I'm just making the point.
And it's not just, and I'm not just saying the people now who are in charge. I'm saying this goes back to 1995, and Super Rugby. When people say what's wrong with Super Rugby's problem started a very, very, very long time ago, and we are dealing with the long-term neglect. And when they turn around, and see, this is the other thing with Super Rugby games at the moment, and I call the broadcasters out, because the broadcasters should say, there's no one here, people. But anyway, they try to get these tight shots that show, oh, no, it looks like there's a crowd here. It's like, no. There's no crowds at any of the games. It's a serious problem. Yes, they've improved last year, but let's be honest with each other, people. No one is going to Super Rugby. We haven't told a good enough story over time. We haven't made enough heroes of our players, and we have to fix this, particularly as we head towards 2027 World Cup in Australia. I will stop raving. Anyway, I will give one last question to you, and we do have other questions, and we'll come to those in the weeks ahead. From Konstantin Debren Liev. Great insight, gentlemen. Very happy to hear a proper coaching insight about how to analyse as a coach of the game. I have a question for you, Link. Have you followed the Under-20s World Cup and the way New Zealand played it? It looked like Chris Boyd brought back the old school Kiwi rugby. Great mix of short and long passing and attacking the gain line from various angles. So the question is, do you think that the All Blacks are holding something back?
I don't know that they're holding something back. Chris was a good coach, so I think I haven't watched haven't watched it in detail, the tournament. I saw some grabs, but that's encouraging. That's the beauty of the game, that you can play it in different ways. There's many different tactical approaches. The thing about New Zealand rugby, there's always been a strong core about how they approach the game, and I think some of the current criticism is about, well, as I said, really robotic quote from Justin Marshall about the current. Now, I don't know if that's the case, and maybe it's just because they're under pressure they've become that way, but we've talked about that there's the fact that there is many ways to play the game. New Zealand have always been good at exploiting that and have the skill set to go with it, but it almost looks like they're playing a little bit encumbered. I'm talking about the All Blacks now. The under-20s have been pretty good at expressing themselves over the years. A lot of good players come out of that and go all the way through. So it is possibly a function of the coaching and the environment at the moment, but it's not far away. I've never believed that the All Blacks are far away from being back to their potential. So at the moment they're under a bit of pressure, but I'm sure that they'll work their way through it.
Please keep those questions coming in, because we do want to feature you, and we've expressed a lot of opinions today. You can agree, you can disagree, you can give us your views, because we want to feed those in, because in a couple of weeks' time we are going to go in depth with Brett Robinson with the new strategic plan from World Rugby to understand just exactly how they are going to spend the money that they have. And Ewen McKenzie, I still haven't had time to go and find out just exactly how much that is, but I'm sure Robbo will know. And just in terms, a couple of people have asked about the referees. And I spoke to World Rugby and I did get a response, and it was they don't want to put somebody up during the window, during the current games, but as soon as the Rugby Championship is over, we will be getting a hold of someone from World Rugby where Eddie Jones and Ewen McKenzie can sit and can talk and can discuss just exactly how the game is being refereed at the moment. And there are a couple of questions that Ewen raised today, which are fair enough. Let's have a conversation, because that's all we want. That's all anyone wants, is for the game to be played at its very best when we have so many great women and men athletes around the world. So we do see the very best of our great game. So Ewen McKenzie, we could talk all night, but we'll have to wrap it up there. We'll come back again on Friday to preview the big weekend, the Women's Rugby World Cup final. We'll also be talking about the Rugby Championship. And please, if you could if you could subscribe, share, comment, get on TikTok, get on Instagram, Facebook, wherever it is that you would consume your rugby content, and give us some sort of review. That always helps us to be found. So very grateful for the ongoing support. We continue to grow substantially, which is fantastic. We have an audience in over 120 countries around the world. So I think talking about rugby around the world is getting people from around the world interested. And I did notice that the Tier 2 European tournament is going to start soon, and I'm going to talk about that as well, because I don't know too much about it, but I'm looking forward to understanding just exactly how rugby is developing at that second tier in Europe. So anyway, for the moment, that's it for this week, but please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.